All right. Well, in the spirit of saving what's left of Crystal's voice, we can get started today. So thank you everyone for joining us today. We are recording this session so that it can be put up with the rest of the CPRS national sessions. So if you are wanting to watch afterwards or have any concerns, you can email programming@cprsedmonton.ca after. For those of you who I haven't met, I am Gwen. I am the director at large with CPRS Edmonton. We have Crystal here and Peter, who are also on our board. Are there any APRs in the room? I think there's a few. Yes, Crystal. I see Dan, and I see also Michelle, I think. There we go. So welcome. And thank you to all of those who have applied for their accreditation this year. So without further ado, today's event is about nonprofits and PR, and especially in this season of giving. 2020 has obviously changed the work that we do as well as our personal lives. And I'm hoping the speakers today can answer some questions about how we can support nonprofits while we take care of ourselves this year, what Giving Tuesday looks like in the middle of a pandemic, and what strategies communicators have been using to pivot their work this year. They'll also be able to tell us about the amazing organizations that they represent. So we have quite a few speakers, so let's get started. All of the full bios, if you do want to read up, are on the Eventbrite page. But without further ado, first up, Phoebe Day. She comes to us from IBC Edmonton, as well as the Alberta Cancer Foundation. So welcome and thank you, Phoebe.
Thanks, Gwen, and thanks for inviting me here. I also look like I've got a big spotlight on me that it's not lit. I'm sitting in front of a window that's got the sun shining right on me, of course, right at this moment, but all good. The sun is better than none. So yes, it's so great to be here. I've actually worked with Carrie and Danica before, so it's nice to see their smiling faces and looking forward to hearing them, and Jocelyn as well. So I will say one of the popular phrases of 2020 and say I'm going to share my screen and ask if you can see it. And then I'll tell you a little bit about the Alberta Cancer Foundation. So the Alberta Cancer Foundation, it's a provincial fundraising organization. We raise money for all 17 cancer centers across the province, including the Cross Cancer Institute here in Edmonton. We are very fortunate that we have a range of donors that support Albertans facing cancer. We have events that are small, like a lemonade stand. We have big ones like the Enbridge Ride to Conquer Cancer. We have monthly donors. We have corporate donors, legacy giving, and a range of revenue streams. This year, one that's been popular or done well for us is a little bit less philanthropic. It's our Cash and Cars lottery, but it's been an important one for us this year, and I'll tell you a little bit about that. So if you're in the nonprofit world, or maybe not, you might have seen in the summer there was reports that were shared about how charities were doing in the middle of a pandemic, and some unfortunately were on the brink of having to shut their doors. Most were going to be facing a decline in revenue of about 30 to 40%. We haven't been immune to that, like most businesses as well. But one of the things that has helped us at the Alberta Cancer Foundation is, as I mentioned, we have a diversity of fundraising streams. So when the events might be struggling a little bit this year, the lottery has done well. So for instance, last year, our Cash and Cars lottery net $1.9 million. This year it was over $3 million. So that's really helps when our event revenue is down. And in the end means more money for Albertans facing cancer. And for some reason, gaming and buying tickets for 50/50 has done very, very well in Edmonton, and we've benefited from that as well. We've also, like many of you, tried to be innovative in terms of how we can increase our revenue, but we've also focused a lot on reducing our costs this year. So one of the things our team, our communications and marketing team has done has been to bring some things in-house that we normally would have outsourced. So our annual report, we've always used an agency to help with that. This year we brought it in, and lucky to have a very talented and creative team that did an excellent job on that. So that saved a lot of money and gave them skills that they didn't necessarily have. And I've heard this has been a career highlight for our graphic designer, for instance. We also cut costs by bringing our Google AdWords in-house. We used an agency for that and had someone on our team who had talked about wanting to develop that skill. The pandemic accelerated that, so she's just recently become Google AdWords certified. And so again, helps with costs and also gives skills to members of our team. I think a really, I don't know if interesting is the right word, but at the beginning of 2020, the Alberta Cancer Foundation was actually in the middle of a big organizational renewal. So we were making, we did make some big leadership changes, some staffing changes. We have a new strategic framework. And what that meant for us at the time was that we had a pretty strong change management plan already going and a strong communication strategy in place. So then COVID hit. And that change, I think mostly it was like, how do are we going to do this on top of the organizational renewal? But we didn't have any choice. But what I think had helped us with the organizational renewal is that we had a good internal communication cadence already going. So we adapted the content to that when we started talking about organizational or working from home, what it meant for COVID. We were used to change for sure and became resilient that way. So this was another layer. But I think that internal communication cadence helped. We had a regular way of speaking to our staff, and then we just adapted that content when it became more COVID focused and what our workplace looked like. I think another thing that helped us at the beginning of 2020 is that we had a campaign that we called Cancer Doesn't Care. So we launched this in February, and it was to raise money and awareness for our patient financial assistance program. So we used strongish language that cancer doesn't care if Jacob can afford childcare, but we do, or cancer doesn't care if Emily can afford rent, but we do. And we didn't know it at the time, but what this did for us was it set the stage for the language that we would continue to use for the pandemic in the next couple months. So, and we have adapted that. Cancer doesn't care that there is a pandemic. More than 50 Albertans hear the words, "You have cancer," every single day. So we use some of that and into language that we used, as I said, when we wanted to raise funds for COVID-related things for the pandemic and non-COVID related things. So, which was equally as important. There's still people every day that need treatment and care, and we wanted to continue raising money for that. Another very, very lucky coincidence for us was that we were already planning a virtual event. We started planning it in 2019. So it just so happened we were ready to go with this and launch it when we were all sent to work from home. And it was this virtual 5K worked very well for us. You could do it, I picked the Grand Prairie one as an example, but anywhere in the province, it was while we were all locked down, it gave people an excuse to go outside, raise some money, help do something for the community. You could do it following all the public health guidelines. So it wasn't as much of a scramble to turn something virtual as soon as we got home, which was or working from home, which was, as I said, coincidence more than anything, but it worked well for us and was a very successful, low cost, for the most part, event. So very thankful for that. And like most of you, I'm sure that you are looking at ways to capitalize on some of the events. Events is probably the biggest thing, the face-to-face interaction with donors, with staff at cancer centers. So for us, we were the same. One of the things that we do, for example, is typically host what's called grand rounds at the Cross Cancer Institute. And that means we invite staff from the Cross Cancer Institute and a few donors. Attendance is, a little bit mixed. So this year, what we did was held something called our Research Rockstar Streamathon. This was in honor of International Clinical Trials Day. We had 4 very talented and bright researchers from across the province, and we turned it into a virtual event and were able to invite a lot more people. Normally at the Cross, we would get between 75 and 100 people attend, and as I said, a couple donors. This one, we had almost 400 people tune in from across the province. So it just completely opened the door and a new opportunity for us. We were able to record it, and then we have since edited different portions of the video. We use it for stewardship and send it out and use it over and over again. We're a very content-rich organization, but have no qualms about reusing things over and over and over again in different ways. So that was one of the things that we did early on, and it worked well for us. Another thing that I think all organizations can do, and you might be doing it in some way, is to tap into the voices of your ambassadors, your volunteers across the province. We've had a Share Your Story program for probably 2 years, but this year put more focus on it because it was one of the ways that we could get in touch with people and hear from people. When we were allowed to be face-to-face, we had postcards we would leave at events. We have a website page where people can sign up. And this does a couple of things for you. I think if volunteers are telling your story, again, you can help with reducing some of the costs, but they're just magnifying your images or your messages and your voice for you. And I think especially this year, to be able to tap into Albertan stories from right across the province to understand what they're going through is especially important. So that's been a real honor for us, and we find that I think it's cathartic for people to share their stories as well. So building that ambassador program has helped an awful lot too. Oh, and a Ride to Conquer Cancer was another one where we tapped into our network of people. Our Enbridge Ride to Conquer Cancer is usually as we say, an epic adventure. It's 2 days in southern Alberta where people camp overnight. They ride more than 200 kilometers. And of course, we couldn't get together to do that this year, but we ended up doing a virtual ride, but it opened it up again to more people. People could do it any place they wanted in the province. They could ride as much as they want. They could raise as much as they want. And it did provide an opportunity for people who might not have been able to commit to that distance that weekend, and then they ended up taking themselves more than we probably and then they would have if they were doing the ride. So it's that network that becomes really powerful as people amplify what your message is. So Gwen mentioned Giving Tuesday and how that looks different this year. In the nonprofit world, Giving Tuesday a couple days ago was a big deal. It's a big opportunity to raise a lot of money and awareness for sure. I think the biggest thing that we did differently this year is we hyper-targeted our audiences with digital advertising. So I had mentioned the Cancer Doesn't Care campaign at the beginning of this year. That one was more of a general awareness campaign and strategy where we advertise on buses and in grocery stores, which is actually different from us. Usually we don't do that general advertising. It's more focused on the community of cancer, people who have been impacted by cancer. In Alberta, it's 1 in 2. So it's a pretty big audience for sure who are diagnosed with cancer. But what we did I learned a new word in the last couple months, which if you're already entrenched in the digital space, you probably know the word polygon, but it's the hyper targeting. And what we did for this campaign is we were able to see people's devices over the last 2 years, for instance. So we could see who's been to cancer centers, we could see who's been to charity runs, to charity golf courses, and target them so that an ad, a Giving Tuesday ad would come up on their phone, hopefully drive them to our website with the ultimate goal that they make a gift. So we just started that. We're going to evaluate along the way. We can see where they've been on our website, see what their journey looks like. Excuse me, and then adjust as needed with our audiences once we've learned a little bit more information about them. So really excited to see what these metrics and data show us, but that's probably one of the biggest adjustments is to really hyper target our digital advertising as people are on phones and devices and using different things. The idea is that there's no wasted impression, so it's really personal and precise. I'm going to just stop sharing the screen for a second as it was my last one as I just finish up. The last thing I wanted to say was I was just reading a blog by an internal communications expert that I follow. Her name is Rachel Miller, and she said in one of her recent posts to think about where we were this time last year. As you know, a lot of organizations are starting their business planning, starting their operational planning, and I don't think that any one of us would have seen where we'd be in a few months from now. So we made a lot of changes in 2020. Some have been good, maybe some not so good. But what she challenged us to do in this piece was to think about what's gone well for you personally as you communicate or as an organization. What are some of the things that you're doing differently? How are you communicating differently or reaching out? And what are you going to continue doing no matter where you are? So if we're all back in the office in the next little while, there are probably things that we will take from being at home. Maybe our organizations have shifted and we won't be back in the office. But I think just looking at what can we do differently now as we communicate. So 2020 has been a darkish year for sure, but I think that there's been some bright lights along the way. As I said, storytelling for us is a really strong part of who we are and strong part of our brand, and we tell real stories about real people and real Albertans, and if they can tell them, even better. So being able to tell those stories this year has been an honor. Our Giving Tuesday video is more of a thank you. It's thanking Albertans, thanking donors for giving patients and families a virtual hug, really, and for supporting them when they're facing cancer during a pandemic. I was going to almost play it, but it's almost 3 minutes long, and I felt like that was cheating way too much when I have 10 minutes to speak. So you can visit our website, albertacancer.ca, to see the video if you're interested, or any of our social media sites. So there have been those bright spots collaborating with other organizations this year. We've done more than we ever have before. When perhaps you might have thought of some organizations as, competitors, we now think of them as partners and collaborators, and it's been a real opportunity to bring them together. So for us, we are always tied back to our purpose at the Alberta Cancer Foundation, which is to create more moments for Albertans facing cancer by inspiring our community to give. And so pandemic or not, that's our anchor, our North Star, and how we will continue to focus no matter what 2021 brings. So happy to answer any questions at the end. I think at the end there's time saved, but I will pass on the torch to next speaker.
Thank you so much, Phoebe. That's amazing. And I love hearing about how you really utilized your internal team. I think that is like phenomenal to hear. All right, now next up we will have Danica O'Neill from the Good Samaritan Society, who also works closely with one of our volunteers, Julie Williams. So thank you, Danica. And again, if you have questions, please pop them in the chat and we will get to them at the end.
You betcha. Thank you so much. I'm so happy to be here, and we're definitely a little bit of a different type of charity. Our communications team is 2 people. We have a graphic designer and a director of communications and stakeholder relations. So that would be Julie. So the Good Samaritan Society, we operate Good Samaritan Society here in Alberta. We also operate Good Samaritan Canada, based out of BC. We have 29 long-term care facilities in 21 communities across Western Canada. We're not a very well-known charity, and that's one of our struggles. Given the pandemic, we've definitely come to the forefront, not necessarily in a positive way. We also have 29 residential homes for persons with developmental disabilities in the Edmonton area. We operate a seniors clinic, and we also offer telecare services, which is monitoring services for seniors still living in their home. We have over 4,400 employees across Western Canada. And we are a faith-based organization. So that's another one of our challenges or opportunities. We were founded in Lutheran roots, and we celebrated 71 years in operation this December. So we've been around for quite a while. So very similar to other charities, we've really had to pivot this year given the pandemic. We heavily rely on family members donating, so those walking into our care homes and physically handing a check. With visitation restrictions, those funds are not coming in. We also rely heavily on our events. So we typically have a golf tournament here in Edmonton. We would have been celebrating our 28th anniversary and we had to cancel it. So huge amount of revenue we had to make up. So we actually came up with a virtual event as well. So similar to Alberta Cancer, we did a virtual run, walk, and roll. And we wanted to include the roll for those of our clients who are in wheelchairs, which is a large portion of our residents and our clients. We raised $100,000. We literally came up with the event. We rolled it out in 4 weeks. We wanted to give all of our care homes. I remember developing at Alberta Cancer like an event in a box, like to be able to have third-party events or other locations do an event. So it was very similar. We supported all of our care homes. You could register on the care home team of your choice, and then the funds actually stayed locally to support programs such as art therapy, music therapy locally for the seniors, especially given the isolation that they've been facing. We also have a lot of people that like gambling and auctions. We took our silent auction that we would typically have at our golf tournament, turned it online, raised an absorbent amount of money for what we typically do. It allowed people who were not necessarily familiar with our organization, and it really allowed us to build our donor acquisition program. We also shifted a lot of our focus this year to grants and funding requests, which aren't necessarily for every charity, but because of the service that we provide and the business that we're in, we had a lot of opportunity to get, whether it was federal, provincial funding, and then a lot of like local community foundations. I think we're close to doubling our number from last year in that program area. So luckily, we did have some resources to put into that. We have also done something we've never done in really paid advertising. We don't have a marketing budget. We don't place our residents in the care. It's all done through AHS or the local health authority. So we went on to radio. We've been doing some paid advertising in the Journal. Just trying to do some general public awareness. The demographic of our donors is aging, again, because of the business we're in. So really trying to engage a younger demographic. We've done a lot of, and I know this is, old hat for a lot of charities, but we had never done boosted Facebook posts, those types of things. So, and it's very different too, coming from an organization such as STARS, to sort of a grassroots charity that, a lot of this is very new to them. They had just sort of raised the same amount of money year over year, doing the same programs, really focused on direct mail, because again, the demographic of our donors really like direct mail. So we really had to shift a lot of our focus. And I think the pandemic really pushed us to the online, really focusing on an online event, online donations. We launched a program called Well Wishes, where family members and loved ones could actually send a virtual card to a loved one in our care. There would be no paper. It would be printed locally, because mail is also an issue, which you don't think about when you're looking at a pandemic. Any of our mail has to sit for 24 hours. There's sort of that incubation period. So lots of changes. Our Giving Tuesday looked fairly similar to it has in the past, but we sort of bookended our Giving Tuesday with our Christmas campaign, virtually, electronically, and by mail, all in the same time. And then we did launch on Giving Tuesday a silent auction. And yeah, we've also been dealing with some of the communications issues in the fact that a lot of our resources from our team are put into communicating with our residents and family members, given COVID outbreaks at some of our care homes. We even had some of our corporate donors pull their support because we were in the spotlight. I'm sure everyone knows our Southgate Care Center at the time was the biggest outbreak in Alberta, accounted for the most amount of deaths. So it's definitely been an interesting 10 months. And I don't think it'll go away anytime soon. Yeah, that's kind of all I had.
That is great. Thank you so much, Danica. Obviously, as a small team, that is a lot for one team to carry. So that is amazing. And next up, we have an event planner and the creator of the Virtual Effect. She's a major player in our city for Winhouse, as well as an advocate for human trafficking, or against human trafficking, I should say. So thank you, Jocelyn Davison, for joining us today.
Thank you so much, Gwen, and hi everyone. I'm so happy to be here. Thank you for having me. I'm here taking a bit of a different angle on the discussion. So being that I am not here representing per se a nonprofit or a charity, I want to challenge your thinking a little bit, or expand your thinking, I think is probably a better word, just in the ways in which as humans, as business owners, as employees, ways in which we can still support causes and charities that are important to us, but in a time that is really so challenging and unlike anything we've ever experienced before. So just to give you a little bit of context about who I am. So as Gwen mentioned, I am the owner of the Virtual Effect. So high level, we're an event planning company, but really more than that, and at our roots, we curate connection and impact through meaningful experiences and meaningful events. And I have kind of another arm to my business, which is called Elevate. And Elevate is a community and a space in which I can kind of pour my philanthropic love to, I guess, for lack of better words. And it's my ability to bring people together, to connect, to create community, to provide support, but also to give a platform for causes and organizations and kind of some, some bigger societal issues that that I think are just so important for us to expand our knowledge on. And so one of the core kind of values of Elevate is philanthropy and, giving back financially through awareness building, and also by elevating the voices of those who need a platform. And I'm able to kind of weave this into my business through the work that I do with clients. And I have the honor and blessing of working with a lot of nonprofits, which is such a way for me to fill my bucket, because we can only, actively be involved with so many. So the fact that I get to learn about some of these other incredible organizations is such a gift. And through the Virtual Effect, we really believe in connecting events to a greater purpose. And so we really, whether that be a nonprofit that we're working with or a for-profit business, trying to pull in that greater purpose and connection to a cause or an organization doing work with some of these incredible things that are happening. So quick question, either show of hands or in the chat, I would love to know, as a person, just you, do you have a cause or an organization that you currently support in any fashion? Totally scanning the screens. Okay, yes. Now, as a business or an employee of a business, do you, from that perspective, have a cause or an organization, that you support? Okay, so we have a few that are coming through. So for me, I want to talk really briefly about the two organizations that I support very actively. And so I work really closely with Windhouse, which is a shelter for women and children fleeing domestic violence in our city. So I work with them in a couple different capacities, one of them being I'm the chair of their ambassador program, which is just really a way for us to kind of get more boots on the ground to be a representative of the organization within the community. And Windhouse has been around for over 50 years now, and as much as I would love to say the need for them is declining, that is not the case. It seems to be increasing every year, and that demand for a safe space for women and children fleeing domestic violence throughout our province is in greater demand as the years pass. Windhouse specifically has 3 shelters. So 2 of those shelters are 21-day stays. So an emergency shelter, basically that chance for women and children to catch their breath, to get connected with the appropriate resources within the community so that they can move on to their next safe space and have those resources and support that they need to kind of restart life. And then they do have a 3rd shelter, which is a longer term stay, and it's more targeted at refugee, immigrant, and trafficked women. So it allows them a longer stay because the issues with which they are dealing are very complex when we're bringing in those added layers of complexity. So they, again, provide all of the supports, everywhere from meals and clothing to nurses, pet care, child care, support and resources, and actual physical things that we need in our home when they leave shelter. They really provide that full spectrum support to women and children in that situation. And the other organization that I work with and I'm proud to be a part of in an advocacy sense is ACT Alberta, and that is the Action Coalition on Human Trafficking. And so they work with other local, provincial, and national organizations and agencies to provide resources and support to victims of human trafficking. And this is a topic I am incredibly passionate about. It was one of those things that, I consider myself to be a fairly educated person, and I had no clue that human trafficking was happening in our country, let alone in our city, and in such a pronounced way. And so I felt very compelled to do my part to raise awareness on this issue. So ACT Alberta works with everything from the individuals who have experienced, who have been victims of human trafficking, and working with them on all of the different pieces from legal to immigration, whatever kind of pieces are a part of their particular individual case, they will provide them the support to navigate it. And as well, they do so much in our province in terms of training and education, conducting research, and really building capacity on a province-wide basis to deal with this issue. So those are our two that I really focus on. And the reason I point out those two is because I'm going to go into kind of some different ways in which we can support organizations to support causes, because there are so many incredible organizations in our city and in our province doing work for so many causes, as shown here today on the call with the 3 other women that are speaking. And the truth is we simply cannot be advocates and involved in every single issue as much as we would love to and our heart wants to. From a time, energy, resource capacity, we simply cannot be all things to all organizations, right? Like that's just the reality of it. And so as a person or as a business, whichever kind of hat that you are wearing, I'm going to speak to it from a business sense, but I encourage you to really reflect on what connects with you and choosing an organization to align with that reflects things that matter to you, that maybe it is a cause that makes sense within the industry that you're working in, and there's kind of like a natural alignment that really would make sense to your base of people, whether that be vendors or customers. Even considering things like, do you need a tax receipt? Because not all nonprofits or charities, so there's even a difference in considering that. Do you want your donor dollars to stay local, national, global? Is that a piece that's of concern to you? So these are all kinds of questions, and I'm skimming over them really quickly, but just things to ask yourself when you're determining who you want to really align with and what cause you want to stand for, whether personally or as a business. As I alluded to, and as we all know, 2020 has been a crazy year, and we aren't all in the financial position to donate in the ways in which we have in the past. So I wanted to just talk about a few other ways that we can show up and support the organizations that we want to contribute to. So obviously we have that financial piece and that ability to donate. And I encourage you, whether that is $10 or $10,000, start and give what you're able to do. Now, if financial is not a piece, we can also show up in a really huge way by spreading awareness. Charities they have their follower base. If we, as their followers, as their supporters, can help them expand the reach of their messaging, This is such a huge way in which we can really give back to them by expanding the network, helping their message to reach more people in different markets, in different circles, because that's a constant battle, that ability to reach new people. So sharing posts on social media, sharing articles, when you're having dinner with friends, make it a topic of conversation. Not only are you helping spread the word, but you're also really providing an opportunity for some rich and deep conversations with your friends, as opposed to maybe just the same old. So I encourage you to really think of that. It's something that's an investment of time, but it's not taking any of our financial resources. Also, education. Take the time to educate yourself through reputable sources and then share what you have learned. The more you learn, I have to say, the more passionate and fired up you're going to get. And so that's just going to shine through and give you more to share. You can also volunteer your time. And I want to piggyback on that with skills. And why I say that is time, nonprofits, charities are often understaffed, and now in a time when those donor dollars and funding dollars are even more difficult, they're even more understaffed. So if we can show up and volunteer our time and support them, it's a huge way we can give back. And then also our skills. We have unique skill sets. I'm sure all of you in this room have these unique skill sets that you could really bring value to charities and nonprofits. So think of ways in which you can use your unique skill set, or if you have an underutilized base of employees that just are not busy enough right now, consider donating their time if you're paying them anyhow. So I know that was a quick run through drive-by, and I was probably talking really fast, but I wanted to try and relay as much as I could to you in this time. So my biggest piece of advice is to start donating, start volunteering, sharing, educating. You can start small, but just start and be consistent, because when all of us take those little actions, that is when the big impact happens and we can make a really remarkable difference with what we're working on. So thank you so much for your time.
Thank you so much, Jocelyn. I know that I've had the honor of knowing you for a while now, and watching the awareness that you bring to these topics like human traffic is incredible. So thank you also for your work. And last but certainly not least is Carrie Creaser from Big Brothers Big Sisters, and she comes to us via our communications chair, Peter, who was able to introduce us to her. So thank you for being here, Carrie.
Thank you for having me. Actually, I am with Boys and Girls Clubs, Big Brothers Big Sisters. We're two charities nationally that are amalgamated. We are the only amalgamated organization in Canada. That was from our executive director, Liz O'Neill, who amalgamated us. It's an interesting situation. She's been our executive director for 41 years, which is unbelievable when you think of that number in the nonprofit sector. But she was with Big Sisters, and Big Boys and Girls Clubs was a separate organization, but working together. So we amalgamated 12 years ago, and our goal is to serve the children and youth in our community. So on our Boys and Girls Club side, we have 19 clubs in Edmonton, which is an after-school facility for kids to go to after school. Majority of our youth are in poverty. They are from single-family homes. They are in a unique situation where they may not be able to have dinner unless they come to our club. And it is heavily staffed with volunteers as well as some of our staff, but we're very volunteer driven. And then on our Big Brothers Big Sisters side, that is a mentorship side of our organization, where we fully operate by volunteers, recruit volunteers to become mentors for the kids of our society. So kids range from, any child needs a mentor. It's not as specific as our club side seems to focus a little bit more on the underprivileged youth. On the mentorship side, we focus really on any child that needs help in this time, and not just in this time, all of the time. So one thing that we did change with COVID, obviously, is a lot of our mentorships used to be a one-on-one, meet once a week, go to a movie, go to a hockey game, whatever the situation might be. But now we've transformed to a completely virtual mentorship program, which is really exciting. In terms of me, I am the manager of fund development here. So my team of 3, that's including me, we take care of all fundraising, all events, all communications, really anything to do that's out in the public. The interesting thing with us is I love being last because I got to learn I worked at the Alberta Cancer Foundation, so I understand their strategy, getting to learn the other strategies from the others, but we are actually the opposite of kind of all of that. We are grant driven. We get about 85% of our funding from grants specifically. So we're blessed that we are 2 national organizations which offer us grant opportunities. And my role is I take care of all of our grant writing. So it is about 90% of my role here is to, it's my favorite part of my good job, which is great that it takes up so much, but it's really telling our story every single day. And so I get to incorporate all of the above in how we raise our money. And so we work with our nationals on different opportunities for grants, but we also have grants through lots of different opportunities that are local. We're also a United Way partner. With that, they're our largest funder. And with that comes some other opportunities that are a little bit different than my other panelists here. So with United Way being our major funder, we don't focus our fundraising on events at all. We have 2 events. One is a golf tournament and one is a Lobster Lovers Gala. They each raise about 150, 200,000 each. Luckily, or not luckily with COVID, I was just able to apply for other grants to replace those dollars. So we didn't really feel a big hit with losing our event revenue because I just found different ways to try to replace it, which I was successful this year. But we also, just like Phoebe and the Alberta Cancer Foundation, we also have a lottery. Our lottery ended in April. So we kind of had that weird, the beginning of COVID was kind of the last month of our lottery. And we were a little nervous when COVID hit. We're like, oh, this could be the worst dream home lottery we've ever had. And we've done it for 41 years. And it turned out to be the best we've ever had. We raised more money in 1 month than we typically ever would. So, our dream home lottery ranges between 1 and 1.2 million in profit. And the last dream home that ended in April was 1.9. And the crazy thing is about half of that came in 1 month. So it's a very unique, just like Phoebe, people are all over the lotteries and the online opportunity to support, which we're really blessed. We launched this next lottery about 3 weeks ago, and we are 500,000 higher than we were at this time in our last lottery. So it is very obvious that our community wants to support, and if you're able to spend the marketing dollars on your lotteries, this is the way to do it. We anticipate a really successful year and we're really excited about it. Another way that we are able to raise some money that is different was with the COVID emergency grants this year. So because we're a social service and we support the community directly with serving children, we were able to replace a lot of our COVID loss of revenue through events, through those channels, and those came directly from the government, which was really remarkable. The government is one of our top funders, provincial and federal, so we're really blessed in that way. In terms of communications, we are unique. We don't send other than our lottery, we obviously promote our lottery quite heavily in the market in a marketing way, but we don't solicit for donations. Majority of our communication is purely for volunteer recruitment. Volunteer recruitment is how we operate, or volunteers is how we operate. So because of the mentorship and on the club side, it is 100% where we focus our communication strategy. We do little things, like we did Giving Tuesday, we did a little thing, but we really want to focus more on sending out the message of the need for volunteers and mentors. When COVID hit, we had to close our clubs and we had to really think about that word pivot. How do we adapt? How do we change? We don't want to lay off all of our staff. We don't know how long this is going to be. We can't have our kids in our clubs. So what are we going to do? So the first week we had a lot of strategy meetings of what our plan is going to be. And we realized pretty fast that we can't have a plan until we ask the community what they need from us. And that's what we did. We did about 3,000 calls in the first 3 weeks of COVID. And we talked to our families that we serve and we asked them what they need. And then 85% of them said they needed food support. The majority of our families are challenged in financial ways. And the food bank, interestingly enough, was having one of those situations where they had lots of money and lots of food. Everybody was supporting the food bank, which they should, but they didn't have enough distribution locations and a way to get the food out in the community. So that's where we came in. We turned our 19 clubs into food bank hubs where our staff was organizing food, organizing Pampers, and making appointments for families, not just our families, all the families in the community to come and pick up their food. So that was essential. We did that until our clubs could open. In July, we opened for summer. We did summer programming. And as of last week, we're closed again. And so we're still, we're doing that 3 week. We'll just close for 3 weeks, see what's going to happen. And hopefully we aren't in lockdown situation again, as we're all kind of playing the waiting game of what's going to happen. We're in the same situation with us. I heard somebody talk about partnerships. Phoebe talked about partnerships. That's how we always have been. We rely on our partners. We rely on our donors. We do have a lot of individual donors. When I say we don't do a lot of communication for fundraising, that doesn't mean we don't solicit donations in different ways. We just don't do it in a public setting. We have a lot of private donors and a lot of corporate donors as well. So one of the strategies that we did on a communication side is every single month, I send out an email to every donor that we have on what we're doing and what we've done that month and what's needed to be done this month and what our families are saying and what our families need. You know, a great example is when the kids all went to online, so many kids in our community, they don't have computers. We had 900 kids that didn't even have internet. And so I went to TELUS and I asked them for 900 people to get free internet, and I was lucky and they gave it to me. And these are the kinds of things that the community might not even think about that was happening when these kids went home. I worked with the Edmonton Community Foundation and I got a couple thousand Chromebooks because so many kids did not have computers, a way to do the school at home. They relied on going to school. And so our partnerships really elevated the amount of work we could do in the community, and our families told us what they needed. So that was, I'm getting goosebumps even just thinking about it, because this is what my life has been for the last 10 months. And while some people say COVID is the worst thing that could happen, and in many ways it is, like we're all in the same storm, but we're all in a different boat. And for us at BGC Bigs, we really feel like we could serve our families and our kids more than we ever did before, in different ways. And so we feel really blessed that as of today, we're not feeling the financial crunch yet. We expect it next year for sure. We had the opportunity to apply for different grants and have different, Coca-Cola donated $1 million to Boys and Girls Clubs, and we were able, and they did it again. And there's a lot of that stuff that's happening that many people just have no idea. And it's really inspiring. And so COVID taught us to pivot and change. And I feel like the most successful fundraisers out there are the ones that are like, let's do it. Let's figure it out and just change how you do your everyday work and elevate that work. I think that's it. If anybody has any questions, I'm happy to take it. And thank you so much for inviting me to this. This is fantastic.
Thank you so much, Carrie. I mean, like, I think I speak for a lot of people. We get exposed to a lot of doom and gloom, especially as communicators, but that is just so uplifting to hear you doing such incredible work, and that, taking advantage of all those partnerships for the betterment of the whole community. So we do have a couple questions in the chat. First one is for Phoebe. How do you get a handle on all your stories so that you can repurpose different mediums? Do you use a special tool or app?
Good question. We don't have fancy systems for sure, so they're probably more outdated than anything. I think the easiest way we do it is we have someone's created a wiki, so we tag all of our stories based on if it was a breast cancer story, if it was someone who receive patient financial assistance, if it was lung cancer, whatever, someone who was on a clinical trial. So then anyone on our staff can go and search the wiki to find a patient story that way and use that if they want someone to speak at their events or whatever it is. So that's probably the simplest way that we tag everything and capture in one space.
Very nice. Are there any other questions, either not in the chat or if somebody wants to ask a question, please feel free to unmute yourself. I feel I can see someone.
Questions. Gotta get some tough ones.
Okay, I have a question for all of you, all four of you. What has been the best thing in general that has come out of, you know, this very dark time? Carrie, obviously, you talking a lot about that, but like on an individual level, like what has this taught you as a communicator?
I'm unmuted, so I guess I can go first. I realized I was unmuted because I was begging for the questions. I think the number one thing that I've taken out of it is really to, from a communicator standpoint, is to be really transparent in what your charity needs and what you're working on. I think that's something that kind of gets lost in my nonprofit experience. It has been one of the things I feel like gets lost, but it's one of the things that I feel like has been a real focus during COVID, is to really just be honest. We need this. We need this now. We need this from you. This is what we're doing to make this happen.
Yeah, and I would say one of the things I think probably from a leadership point of view, or a leader, is to continue to lead with empathy and care for not just for the external audience or external stakeholders as donors or patients or families, but your staff too. I think that this has thrown all of us for a loop. So it's making sure that similar to Carrie, that you're being transparent, but with your internal audiences, you're communicating, you're checking in more, you're saying, I don't know if you don't know the answers, whatever that looks like, but just leading with empathy and care has been a big one for sure.
I would say absolutely asking for what you need, Carrie. That was a great point. I think it's been pretty heartwarming to see the generosity and ability of people to still give in any way that they are capable of doing, and you know, seeing people come together, and that there really is still that desire and want and need to come together and help each other. So I think when we provide the opportunities for people to do so, they step up in huge ways, and it's been really special to see that.
I completely agree with everyone. And I think you need to continue to share your story even in the bad times. Like, we rely very heavily on our care homes for social media content, for stories. I mean, last week we had our staff dress up in deer costumes and our residents were shooting them with Nerf guns. Like they you know, they have so much fun, and we need to share that. Like Carrie, we needed iPads. We needed to help facilitate video conferencing with our residents. TELUS gave us 48 tablets. You know, like, they don't know what you need until you ask, and the worst thing they can say is no. We also really had to think about taking care of our own, our frontline staff. Pandemic fatigue is a real thing. Given outbreaks that we were dealing with, we ended up having our team shifted very much so from fundraising to supporting our teams. So we developed staff comfort rooms for our staff to have a room to go to and just decompress, grab a snack. We used all of our vendors. We hit them all up. We had these amazing baskets where they could just go and take a moment and gather themselves. So yeah, it's been definitely a learning experience, I think, on as a communicator, as a fundraiser, as a human being. Yeah, it's really, true colors are really shining through for sure.
Amazing. Well, thank you all so much. Thank you everyone for coming. Today's live event was recorded and also live tweeted. So if you do want to go share some of the finer points, feel free to go retweet that on Twitter. We will be sending out a feedback survey shortly. I would encourage you to fill that out. And our next event is a cybersecurity and AI crisis workshop on Thursday, January 21st from 9 a.m. to 11 a.m. As a partnership with CPRS Regina. So I hope you'll consider joining us for that. Thank you again for being wonderful communicators, for all that you have done this year. As communicators, we go through a lot, but it's nice to know that, you know, we can all support each other and be there for each other. And that's the beauty of this profession too. So thank you all so much.
Thank you. Bye.
Thanks. Bye.